Welcome to Reefing Radio, your go-to salty station for reef aquarium talk, tips and interviews. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to Reefing Radio. Today we've got a really fun topic. We're going to be diving into the weird and wonderful and talking about some of the more unusual fish and invertebrates that you can keep in your aquariums. And this feeds into a conversation that seems to be sort of bubbling away in the background at the moment in the hobby about how similar reef tanks look these days. So when you scroll through social media, you see the same fish, the same corals, the same mixed reef essentially over again and again. So we wanted to have a chat today about what else is out there that you can keep. So different livestock can maybe serve as inspiration and to spice up your reefs and to get people excited about what else they can do. And joining us for that discussion is Jake, known as Jake EC on Ultimate Reef. He is a well-known member there. His build threads get a lot of attention because he keeps a really broad and unusual mix of fish and invertebrates. And his tanks really feel like true reefs. They're much closer to what you actually see in the wild when you're sort of typical hobbyist aquarium. So we wanted to bring him in to chat with us about keeping these kind of more unusual livestock, and we'll get into his tanks in a moment. But of course, joining me as always are the Bristleworm Bros, James and Gareth. Welcome, Jake, to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. All good. How about you guys?
I'm absolutely fine. Thank you. Yeah, good to have you on. Nice to meet you as well.
Let's get into it then. So, Jake, who are you? Tell us about yourself and your aquarium.
Yeah, so I was about 14 years old, I think, when I first got into the hobby. I remember one day I was looking on YouTube and I came across, there was an old channel called Coral Fish 12 Gallon, I think his name was. He was another teen at the time.
The American guy.
YouTuber now. But he was a teen when I was, so I was watching it. And I got into his whole little nano tank he had, and I became very obsessed. And it just so happened 5 doors down from me on my street, there was a gent who was opening a fish shop in our town. So being a 14-year-old, it was like perfect, do a little Saturday job. Parents then bought me a 3-foot reef for Christmas, and for a number of years I worked there, on the side of school. After school, I then moved to London. So obviously I had to shut the tank down, get rid. When COVID hit, I moved back out of London again and thought, oh, perfect. This is a perfect excuse to have another little tank. So that would have been my nano that you may have seen online. Now, obviously, I'm in my own home, so I've got a bigger excuse to have a bigger tank. So I've got my 4-foot now. This has been set up for probably a year and a bit. It's been a little while. So yeah, and I've been back in the hobby for about 4 years now.
Yeah, so we can see your tank, and then maybe you can send us a photo of it, and I'll put it on the Instagram for this episode, so viewers can know what you're talking about. But yeah, as I said in the intro, it looks very natural. So it's a proper mixed reefing that you've got SPS, LPS, soft coral by the looks of it. But you're well known. I mean, the reason why we brought you in is that you're well known for keeping more unusual things. So can you tell us about some of the more unusual stuff that you've got in this aquarium?
Absolutely can, and I had to write a list down because I started thinking about it as I was jotting it down, and every time I looked at the tank, I saw something else that I'd forgotten. So I think most people know me for the inverts I keep. So I tend to go for different sort of inverts that I can either observe, in a symbiotic relationship. I find those particularly interesting, or just various things I haven't seen kept before, or things you can't find much info online about, because I tend to like being the one that learns it myself. So I can go through my list if you want to do that now and just tell you what I've got in there.
Definitely.
Perfect. So at the minute, I've got 4 Donald Duck shrimps. So you may have seen those hinge, which I'm quite excited about because as of yesterday, they've just started having eggs, which is quite cool.
I'm going to interrupt you. Do you know if they are viable in a tank or?
I honestly know there's just not enough info online about them. So it's one of those that if I had the space and time, I definitely would like to give it a go at some point. Because I know that cleaners have been done, sexy shrimp have been done. So I would like to give that a go because that's quite a rare little critter in there. I've got elephant snails, sponge crabs, strawberry crabs. I've got a fire urchin in there with a paired zebra crab, dwarf yellow cucumbers, a couple of brittle stars, an Aussie sea biscuit star, cleaner shrimps, obviously. I've got a pair of dwarf blue boxer shrimp. I've got the weirdest orange sea cucumber that it's like an alien. It's really weird to look. Cowries, squat lobsters. I've got the 3 antler crabs, which I think were the famous 3 that are online. I've got an unidentified shrimp, but I think it's a venustus, which is it's a coral, it's a mushroom hosting shrimp. He's very see-through, so I can't really find an ID on him online, but he's quite interesting.
I'm trying to quickly Google these.
I'll send you a list after so you can have a little look.
Yeah, Venista shrimp. I haven't heard of this.
Anchiomenes venistus is the Latin for it. So then I've got various different porcelain crabs in there. I think it's about 7 I'm up to at the minute. Different species. My favourite is one from Hong Kong. It's bright red and purple. That's cool. It's quite cryptic, but he sort of runs around the rockwork. A family of cluster dusters, various mussels and bivalves that I've spotted in coral tables over the years, and I've gone, definitely I want that. I've got my clam up the top, a harlequin shrimp, a pair of pom-pom crabs, acrocrabs, acropistal shrimp, a deep water decorator crab, just to top it off there.
Nice.
That's the weirdest fish and chip order I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's not often you talk about inverts before I get to the fish, is it?
No, amazing.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many there. I don't even really know where to start. I mean, you mentioned quite a few starfish, and that's something which maybe a bit later on in the conversation, I've got a point to talk about. There's all these weird things out there. You often see stuff in shops, and I often think, should we be importing that? Should we be keeping that? Because this is impossible to keep. And often people say that about starfish. And I know, James, you had a blue link here for quite a long time, and people say they're impossible to keep. So what's your experience like with starfish? Are there any way you think, okay, this is, everybody could keep this, or are they all quite difficult? They're all quite specialist. And what do you do to kind of keep them happy?
Brittle stars are almost guaranteed to live in most tanks. They are just, because they're quite adaptable. I've got 2 different types. I've got the typical, the one that sticks his leg out of the rockwork, and then I've got one that's more, if you guys know the old, you can't get them anymore, but the Hawaiian red serpent stars. I've got a peach coloured one of those, which is a bit more active. I'll feed the tank later so you guys can see, but the black brittle will stay in the rockwork, but this serpent will run around the sandbed as soon as I put food in. So he's a very active hunter.
How big are these talking? Because I've got some, obviously you get like the tiny ones, and then I've got one which is kind of red, and they're about, I don't know, legs expanded maybe 10 centimeters or something, and that just came in on a coral and they've exploded. But then you get the massive like green ones which like eat fish and stuff. So how big are these ones, and are they reef safe in general, or?
So the black brittle, definitely reef safe. I've seen them get up to, a foot across.
Wow.
Quite easily, but you won't often see, I can see him from here, and you only ever see 1 or 2 legs at once.
Right.
I had a black brittle that lived in my sump, and that was probably about a foot across, link to link. It would.
They kind of scare
very,
me.
very leggy.
They kind of scare me. They're so like, I don't know.
The peach one, the serpent that's in there, he is freaky. A lot of people, when I show him, when I feed the tank, they get a bit uncomfortable because he's just much quicker than you'd think a starfish could be. And he's, at the minute, I would say he's probably about 6 to 7 inches wide. I don't know how big he'll get because, again, it's one of those that I haven't seen online or read about. So I quite often, if there's something I don't know, I'll try it just so I can learn.
Yeah.
He's quite interesting.
So you mentioned biscuit starfish.
Yes.
Yeah. So are these ones like easier to keep or tricky?
So, as a general rule, I would stay away from linkies and phromias. I would say those 2 are those are the red and blues you always see. But those are really, really hard to keep. I've heard and found. There was a really cool article in one of the magazines here about what they might eat. And it was all about, it was sort of, they're a bit of a detrivore in terms of they go after things like rotting sponges and things like that, which is why I think most people don't have much luck. And then some are more specialist. They go after like bacterial colonies and things. So I haven't tried to keep them in this tank purely because of their reputation, but I found that the Aussie sea biscuit I've had is reef safe. He's been in with it. I mean, I've got SPS, LPS and softies in there, and he hasn't touched anything. It's quite small. From reading online, there are 2 very similar ones. There's one from Africa and one from Australia. One is coral safe and one isn't.
Right.
And there's a way to distinguish. It's basically the thorns if one has it and one doesn't.
Okay.
But again, this is all very light reading because there's not much about them. But I found he's okay. And Nardoa, those are the peach tip Maldivian, I think. They come in there. They're quite easy to keep as well. But it's a real experiment. I wouldn't say there's a real easy way of distinguishing.
I kept a blue linkia. I mean, you said it was a while, Chris. I mean, it was probably a couple of years, to be honest with you. And it was an event that wiped it out. So active. It was all over the rocks, all over the glasswork, continuously moving. Yeah, interesting about the sponges. I've always had quite a lot of sort of just natural sponge growth on my rock work, so I don't know if that was helping feed it. But I'd always got the impression, just from how it looked like it was grazing, that it was eating biofilm. It was moving quickly, but grazing continuously. It wasn't eating algae. So yeah, I'd always assumed it was sort of bacterial colony or biofilm that it was enjoying.
And I think that's probably why they're difficult to keep, because there's only so much of that in a small tank that they can fly through. I mean, you hear the odd case, don't you? But it's trying to find out what they eat and being able to provide it.
Do you know what caught my mind from your your extensive list of beasties? You talked about the starfish, and then there's also a harlequin shrimp in there.
Yes.
How does that work?
So again, another experiment I was running. So I had a problem with asterinas. I'm all for hitchhikers, so I love things that come with corals. And I've been pretty blasé with asterinas in the past, but after a wipeout of zoas, they now have a no admission policy in the tank. So I put harlequin in just to help me clear them out. I find that they leave brittle stars alone. I think because they go after the tube feet of your standard starfish, whereas the brittles, I don't know enough about them, but I don't think they have them the same. It doesn't look like
you're right. It's just the true starfish, isn't it? But you have got a true starfish in there, though.
I've had a true, and he hasn't left it alone. And that, again, I don't know if it's just because there was so many asterinas. He will eventually come out of the tank once he's done his job. But yeah, he seems to ignore it, and they've been in close proximity because it is only 4 foot. So yeah, it seems to leave it be.
It's interesting you say that. It's on my hit list. I'd love a starfish, but I've got a harlequin doing exactly the same job for the same reason. And what's he been in there for? Maybe 8 months now. He's in the sump currently, clearing the sump out, which I suspect by the time he's done, the display will need another go. So I think he's going to be in there for a while, but it's always that fear of you stick him in there and he's riding on the back of this lovely starfish, chomping down on him. So that's interesting. You've seen they're getting on. That's food for thought.
Do asterinas eat zoas, really?
Absolutely.
Not this discussion again.
Having to pull those little face huggers off.
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't believe it either until they wiped the colony out, and they literally wrap around the head, and they don't eat the whole thing. They just eat the sort of the polyp at the top, and then they just
melts, doesn't it? Yeah, I've had exactly the same. Like you described it perfectly. It's like a big hug, isn't it? And you literally peel them off.
Yeah,
they come off zoa shaped.
Yeah, I don't know. I think asterinas are up there with Gareth's fox face for getting the bad rep for anything that goes wrong. But I don't know. I've always had asterinas. In fact, I think I gave Gareth his asterinas.
You did.
But I've always had zoas as well, even in my current tank. I've got zoas that have grown into big colonies, and I've never had an issue with them. So it's funny, isn't it, that sort of reefer experience and how different it is, even when it's the same asterinas, probably from the same tank.
The thing with asterinas is that I think there's about 16 species on average that are in the hobby of sort of the more common varieties. And there's sort of a general rule online, isn't there, that if they've got a certain colour on them.
Red, I think people say, yeah.
I often
find that everybody disagrees on what colour are the bad ones. I think they're red, but other people swear it's just so much variation.
They're not even called asterina, right? They got reclassified into something else. I can't remember what it is, but they got a different name now. I always think starfish are one of those classic sort of reef aquarium animals that when you get into the hobby, you think, I'd love to keep a starfish, and you very quickly are told, don't keep them. So it's interesting to see, but you've got quite a nice selection of them, and maybe people sleep a bit on the serpent stars and the brittle stars and stuff. Like maybe those are a good alternative that's a bit more user friendly, let's say. I'm trying to think what else was on your list. You had the Donald Duck shrimp. I don't think I've seen those once or twice in stores, but they're super unusual as well. They're the sort of thing that, to me, I feel like something would eat them very quickly if you had anything with a big enough mouth, because they seem quite delicate. And what's their behavior like in the tank? Do you see them that often, or
all times?
Okay.
But I think this is where my tank is a little bit unique, in that because I'm very invert-heavy, my stock list is very much catered to the inverts. So it's I wouldn't be putting anything in there that I would think would be a risk. The biggest thing I've currently got in there is a fairy wrasse that is absolutely fine. But I see them at all points. All 4 of them have their little zone where I know exactly where they're going to be. And every so often they then congregate in the night time, and then they run around and they just sort of filter the water and pick up the biofilm across the rocks. But they're not hidden, but I think that's probably a byproduct of the fact that there's nothing in there to stress them.
And you said they've got eggs at the moment?
Yes, I've got the one that sort of sits in the bottom corner. She's carrying eggs. I've got a photo of it because I only spotted it, I think, either this morning or yesterday.
Something that's always stuck out with your tanks for me is that you tend to keep stuff in pairs or groups.
Yes.
both your fish and your invertebrates. Why is that?
I like seeing things interact, how, in the wild, these things will come across each other, and I want to be able to experience that and see how they would interact with each other. Partly because, as we're speaking, I've got two antler crabs who are wrestling. They're literally like locked arms. And I just find that a really curious behavior, because you wouldn't get to see that with only the one. And I also do it, with the fish particularly, because I like to see, there are a lot of golden rules that were handed out from reefing sort of 20 years ago. And it's, well, has that been, was there a reason for it? Has it been tested a different way? So I just find it quite interesting. That's the real reason.
Yeah, Gareth keeps quite a lot of like groups or pairs of fish, and it's something I've started to do. So I've got a pair of pink streak wrasse and what else have I got? I don't know. A few things that are in pairs. And yeah, it's true. Like it's so much more interesting seeing them interacting. And it looks more natural as well. I think many, even the invert in the wild, many of the stuff that we keep live in pairs, because I think it's such a chaotic, dangerous place to live, a coral reef, that once they find someone that they can mate with, they hang on to them. So you sort of see this quite a lot in the wild. So it's true that you're kind of replicating that wild behavior. Gareth, I can't remember what you've got in pairs and groups.
Probably my best one is the my wrasse. I'm trying to remember the name of them. I got it wrong on my reef talk when you came round, and now I'm like, oh, I don't want to get it wrong again. I want to call them bicolor, but they're not. They're the kind of halicories with the red and kind of like green striped. They don't get very big. I'll Google it in a minute, but I have four of them, and I was just looking at them the other day, and you get. I think one of the best things about it is they've clearly set up a bit of a hierarchy. So there's the male, and he's lovely and bright, chunky, like real chunky boy, and then there's two that are got similar colours, nowhere near extreme as the male, and there's one that's much paler, and it's like low of the pecking order. It's perfectly healthy, it's good size, but you can see that kind of. Like it almost makes me want to have like 6 or 8 then, because it's like, what would it be like with an even bigger group? And this, I've said it a few times. I keep missing it, but there is something spawning every night, and the fish go wild for it. And again, you don't get that reaction, that kind of behaviour of fish with spawning. So like that's exciting. I'd love to know what it is, and I'd love to catch the eggs and do something. But generally, the fusiliers are so fast. It's like they're half out of the water. You can just hear them splashing away as they're eating whatever it is. But I'm all for it. I don't think I'll put fish in singles if I can help it from now. So I'm well on board with that.
I guess people do it because it's expensive to buy. Like even just one of these shrimps can be quite pricey, right? So having 4 or 5 or something, is quite a lot. But also just even finding them. So often when I go to aquarium stores looking for weird and interesting stuff, there'll just be one of it, right? So I've only ever seen like one squat lobster at a time rather than groups. So maybe we should say as well, Jake, so you work at Reefkeeper Rugby occasionally, not really part-time, but kind of just for fun, essentially, is how I understand it.
Yeah, that's right. So when I first re-entered the hobby, I very much was a traveller. I hit every shop I possibly could every weekend. I went up to some of the Scottish Reefer Club on Ultimate Reef, may remember, because I came up there for one of their meets. I've tried to go all over the place. But I think the key to inverts like this, in trying to find even, just rare fish, I don't know if you heard that, my roller mat just went off. I think the trouble with most of these sort of inverts is exactly as you say, you'll find one. And I think it's because most shops will get in what they know will sell. So it's all about building that relationship with people who are able to source or willing to. And for me, that was rugby. So I ended up, after going to all these various shops, I ended up getting on well with sort of the rugby team. And I just really enjoyed the way they approached the hobby. So I ended up pestering them that much. I think one weekend they just finally went, right, just work. Just come here and work with us.
You're here all the time. You might as well be paid for it.
So I ended up taking a sort of a part-time job with them. I'm there, most people who'll see me there it's usually once every 2 weeks. And that does definitely help with helping to source some of these sort of weird and wonderful creatures. I would say building that relationship with the store that you find relates to you most, though, is key. People are more willing to source when they know you're, either a regular, or if you put something on order, you will come and get it. And that's just exactly how my relationship with rugby started off. And now, real good group of friends.
It's interesting you say that. That's exactly how I've managed to get my pairs and sets and things, is that I've been shopping at my local Maidenhead for I don't know how many years in the freshwater side. And now, like you say, I just go to him and say, next time you see on the fish list, ... can you order me in? Like I was ordering those wrasse in groups of 4. And he's like, yeah, sure. And yeah, I think, like you say, that rapport is so important, isn't it? It's kind of something to really foster. Like we can lose that local fish store link if we're not careful. So yeah, I think great advice.
So we talked about invertebrates, and you've got a great selection. We've also got some interesting fish as well. So maybe you could tell us about what you've got fish-wise.
So I will say, when I first set the tank up, if anybody watched the thread, they do know it did go through a bit of a wipeout. So I stocked it very early on, and unfortunately disease did clear it. So I'm in the middle of restocking. So the nano fish are a bit low, but just to run through what I've got. So I've got 3 fish, which are my OGs. They came with me when I re-entered the hobby. So I've got my 2 clowns and a starry blenny, 3 of my favourite fish. So they will come with me everywhere I go. And then I've got the pink circled dragonets, which are just a favourite of mine. I think they're really, really pretty. And just getting to see them do their sort of mating dance is really interesting.
They're very rare. You might be the only person in the UK with them.
I know of 2 pairs.
Okay.
The other one belongs to a friend of mine, but I know of 2 pairs. So mine and his.
There's an interesting backstory to those, I think. In fact, is it De Jong that got them in? Or,
yes.
Yeah, and they
So,
by accident, they came in as bycatch, essentially, and they happened to just have a male and female, and were able to breed from those, and that's presumably where yours came from.
So exactly that, yeah. They did come via TMC, but I presumably through De Jong, because I know that they are the original sort of captive breeders. And they came in very, very small, so they've sort of grown up here in the UK, but when they came in, they were very similar to the captive bred mandarins you get in. So yeah, real tiny babies.
All of these things which were mentioned, I encourage people to Google because they're super interesting. So they're kind of like a pinky brownie kind of color, right, with kind of white, like really perfect circles on them, right?
And when they flare, so the male's doing it literally right this second with the female. When they flare, their top fin is like yellow and black danger tape. It's just really bright, stripy colors, and he does it every night. Without they're doing it. You might see them going up in the water column right now.
I can see. So they're basically breeding at the moment. I mean, that's another, mating. Yeah, that's another. Yeah, you can see. Oh wow, that's incredible. We should start filming these episodes when people have got interesting stuff going on. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, are they similar to the other dragonets, mandarins, in terms of care and stuff?
Yeah, I haven't found them to be any more difficult. In fact, I found these to be in line with the captive bred ones. They're very, very bold, and the little female is probably the smallest fish I have in the tank, and she is the most inquisitive. So if I'm ever doing maintenance, or I'm cleaning the sand, or I'm down in the sump, she's at the front of the glass watching, which is just bizarre when you compare it to the size of other fish. But yeah, and they eat regularly. I've got catered my flow, so I have an area of flow where the food hits the sand, and they know exactly where it is. They go straight on it. They'll eat prepared food, and they'll eat live sort of pods that I eat regularly as well.
Yeah, super cool. What else have you got fish-wise?
So I wrote these down as well. So I've got 3 tessellated blennies. So I think, Chris, you and I spoke about these a little while ago.
Okay.
So these were captive bred. They came from America. I can't remember if it was Biota or the other one. So they were very cool. I must admit, I see those very irregularly.
Okay.
I know the 3 zones they exist in. I thought they would be more of a colony, similar to like sailfin blennies, but they're not. They're quite individual, which is interesting. But I know roughly where they are, and they just sort of dart out exactly like a barnacle blenny would.
Right. How big are they? Like, I couldn't get an idea of whether they're big or small or...
About an inch.
Okay.
Just over an inch. So quite small. Their colours have come up since I've had them, though. So the sort of the typical blue and orange spots on their face have really come through now. So I've got those. I've got an Earl's wrasse in there. So there's a Cerabilis early. So got one of those swimming around just right behind me here. I've got a pair of Christmas gobies, a pair of tiger gobies, which are very much like the Christmas gobies, but black and white. A vampire tang, who's my sort of latest addition. An unexpected one, it's a rehome from another well-known member of Ultimate Reef. And then I would say piece de resistance that's currently in there. I've got a trio of grammars, a De Jong, normal De Jong grammar. I've got a De Jong platinum grammar. And then I have a De Jong crossed with a royal grammar. Got a hybrid in there as well. So
Did they come in together?
all together.
And do you know if they were kept in the same tank together?
They weren't. So the De Jong and the hybrid were. They're a mated pair, male and female. The platinum was brought in separately, and I presume is also a male. And I've had the platinum for a few. I've been a bit stum online because I've just out of the sheer fear of a rare fish. I believe the platinum is one of 2 in Europe, the only one in the UK.
Again, encourage people to look these up because they're beautiful fish. But I hadn't heard of the platinum, so it's essentially a De Jong
with the
grandma,
white stripe.
but with white. Yeah, it looks white fins. Looks incredible.
So yeah, and I was a bit worried. Obviously, that's two males going together, and that was another rule that I've been frantically researching recently. Is grammars. People say don't put males in because they will fight, but I've got all three of them living together harmoniously. They've been in there a little while now, sort of hovering around the same rock. I've got a video of them digging a burrow together, which is fascinating. And then the very last fish, which I forgot to mention, I also have a female candy basslet who's swimming in the cave behind us.
Nice. Yeah, you've got some real jewels in there. Not cheap fish either.
Keep that list, because if Chris ever comes around, you want to count the fish on the way out. I reckon.
Yeah. I would love a candy basset. That's like a dream fish for me. I got a Swiss guard at one point, and unfortunately I lost it when we had a power cut. But yeah, that was about as expensive as I wanted to go, really. But are you able to get stuff cheaper because you work at the store?
Both privileged in that the work I do, does give me some flex on this. And yes, also by working at the store, things come in a little bit cheaper.
Did you request those specifically, or was it a case of like TMC brought them in and you saw them, or?
It's a real mixed bag. So I do a lot of research online for things I want, but knowing that there are so many things that TMC can get in, you'll never know everything. So I would say a few of them I knew I wanted. The others, things have come up and gone, oh, we have a chance to get this. Is this something you want? It's usually yes.
You're known as, okay, let's ask Jake if he wants this, okay.
I think most of rugby is, to be fair. So all of the group like to keep unusual things. So because we have a good sort of rapport, if something wild comes up, there's a good, there's a question first, are you guys interested in this? So, and usually one of us is like, oh, definitely we'll.
I keep meaning to go to rugby because I keep hearing that it's very, very good for fish. Like Moss End is probably the one I go to the most, but they've even told me you should go to rugby because they tend to have more weirder stuff and more variety and things. So what's some of the most interesting stuff that you've seen in the store recently?
The Platinum Diongi was probably the coolest one that came in quite recently. They've got a chevron tang in their display that came in quite recently, which is very rare now. It's really interesting because it's a lot of fish that I would be really interested in. And then they also cater to the other side that, things like they'll have predator fish in, they'll have so many different scorpions and leaf fish in that I've never heard of, sea goblins, the sort of really wacky side of it. They'll have, I think the cool thing about rugby is they have a lot of space for some of the bigger fish as well. So you'll see a lot of big tangs, butterfly pairs, big wrasses. It's obviously, it varies every week. They get a lot of captive bred stuff in as well. But I would say they all have I'm trying to think of what's the craziest thing they've had in quite recently. I'd say a lot of it's sat behind me, but
yeah, you take it all home with you. That's the yeah.
I think the cool thing about them is not, there is most things they can get as well. So I think coral wise, they've had some crazy stuff, and they've had some true Japanese weeping willow toadstools in. They've had so many different colonies of things. They do a lot of the sort of, the homegrown scollies that TMC.
Right. Yeah.
Really good. I think the one thing I think they're really good for is their euphyllias. They get really good euphilia colonies in as well. Pretty much everything, anything you think of, they have had.
You've got all these special creatures and beasts. They're all, let's face it, one of a kinds. How do you? I'm kind of thinking like redundancies and what's your protocol to ensure their safety? Because you must be hitting a point, surely now, where any new additions or any like the risk factor is increasing. What do you do to deal with that risk factor?
Due to the wipeout I had last year, I have been. Sorry, it was 2024 now.
Sorry, was that white spot or?
It was a trio. I had Spot, Velvet, and Brooke all at once.
All right, yeah.
It was a real
unholy trinity. Okay,
absolutely, yeah. It was quite critical. Within a couple of days, I think it was my fault. I fully stocked the tank. I think I added 37 fish in the space of 1 week, and it was all nano fish. So it wasn't an issue with bio load or anything. It was just more the sheer variety that got added in. Something must have brought it in from various different places. So I'm much more almost scared to add things nowadays. Yeah. The fish have only recently, it's a year and a bit later, and only recently have these new additions gone in. I now, obviously, owing to the fact I work there, everything comes through rugby, where I know things have been coppered. I also did when everything I had, obviously, that survived, the three main fish I got left, they went through a humble fish approach to getting rid of it. So they did a peroxide dosing and formalin. And then I've got a quarantine tank upstairs ready to go for anything new, so I can do power. Much more worried about what does go into this. Inverts I'm less concerned with, but for example, like the sponge crab that I got did come from a shop where I could see visible signs of something I wouldn't want to add. I actually set up a quarantine bowl. I had a fish bowl on my desk for nearly 3 months just to make sure this one little crab, when he went in, was totally fine. So yeah, much stricter about controls now.
It's an interesting question, that, Gareth. Is that from like a financial perspective, or is it from a rarity perspective?
So I think for me, it's definitely not the financial side. That I think if you're in the hobby for the finance side, you're probably you're going to get hurt along the way, aren't you? But for me, it's just a specialty. Like I wouldn't say with any particular rare fish, but I've got some real. They mean a lot to me. The fish, the pets, at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's the sort of interesting thing, isn't it? It's that I think we had a conversation about the when you draw parallels between like fish and mammals or what have you in terms of your pets, and it's like, is a rare fish's life worth more than a chromis's life? Because that was the sort of emphasis that the question put on it. But I know you don't think like that necessarily, but it was just, we go back and we think about livestock, keeping livestock, how shops handle livestock, and it's like some animals more, or some fish more equal than others, in terms of their intrinsic value or their morality. That's a philosophical question. But.
So I should say that when Jake shut down his last tank, he went through every grain of sand with a toothpick, picking out all the bristle worms, all the little amphipods and stuff. Yeah. So I think he's very much in the camp that every life matters.
Yeah.
I thought about bringing that up before this podcast. And I went, no, I'm not going to out myself like that. Yes, I've moved tanks. So I moved the Nano from my parents' house to this house. And when I did that, yes, I picked through the sand with toothpicks to save all the spaghetti worms and all the amphipods that I could. And then when I upgraded to the 4 foot, I did exactly the same thing, coming from upstairs to downstairs, obviously it's new sand. I did. I'm a very sentimental person. So these fish, these are with me for life now. The clownfish and the starry blenny being my very first 3 fish back. I was, if they went, I wasn't going to start up again because those are my 3. Obviously now the rest of them are as well, but at that point when things went down. But yes, I'm a little bit too attached to all the various little lives and things that go in there.
Do you plan to add anything else fish-wise? You said you're sort of still stocking, you've got a quarantine set up. So are there any other, I'm trying to think, what else could you possibly want for that?
Now, it's more the nano fish that I find really interesting. So I do have a sort of prospective list of things that are to go in. Today at rugby, I've got 10 candy striped cardinal fish to go in. So I had those when I first set the tank up that I lost. So I've been waiting for them to come back since. So I've got 10 candy striped cardinals to go in. I really like the way they shoal. They're a lot smaller than your typical bang guys. And they have an interesting relationship. Again, talking how we were earlier about how things interact, getting to see how they brood and everything. That's very cool. Pipefish are a favourite of mine. So I would like to add in a pair of blue stripes and potentially, once I've acroed the tank, some dragon pipes, because I like to see how they sort of interact with the reef. Probably my favourite symbiosis that I haven't yet got in this one, but I did have in the Nano, is a pair of Yashigobis with a pair of Randall pistols.
Yeah.
Just a favourite relationship of mine, just seeing that, I don't even know how that evolved in nature. I just find that incredible. Got to have a pair of those in. And then things like, smaller things like trim. So these are things that not necessarily I will definitely get, but if they come up, I want them. So things like trimmer gobies. I've got some limed dartfish on my list. So I think you've all probably seen the really tiny Aliops megastigma.
Yeah.
If possible, I would like to do those one day, but I know that they're a real stickler to get through the whole sort of transit system.
Gareth, I think those are the tiny ones that they had in Lechlade.
Yes,
and you were like, I've never seen fish so small before.
So the problem with them is their sort of digestion system is so small that if they're not fed within 24 hours, their stomach essentially just closes up. So they've got to be fed through the entire sort of transit here, and it's very hard to guarantee. But there is a bigger species. You've got the limed dartfish, so I'm after those. Various other things, nano cleaner gobies, nano blue eyes. Anything small now, anything I can get my hands on.
How do you do your kind of like stocking numbers in that case? So it sounds like a lot, but obviously they're very small fish. Like how will you know when you are full, if that makes sense?
So I listened. You actually did a podcast on this a little while ago, exactly that topic, didn't you? And you said that how do you know when enough fish is enough? And I was thinking about that very question, because it's when you list out. I mean, the fact that listed all those inverts to start with.
It sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But I bet it looks empty most of the time.
I think you can probably see behind me the activity that's going on. A lot of these fish are sort of clinging to the rock, or they're building burrows. So I think I think I'd find one of you, I can't remember who raised it, somebody said it's about interactions and how you see the aggression within the fish. And I think that would be my point where I go, right, there's probably enough in there because things are sort of interacting with each other a bit too much or more than I would expect. But I would say because I haven't got, tangs swimming around or big wrasses or anything, I would say there's plenty of room. I think the very last thing, possibly, I want to get the nanos in first, but then if there is enough room in the column, I would like to do a shoal of Pulcherium asanthius and a Midas blenny because I really like their sort of interaction as well. But that, exactly as your question, I need to see how busy the tank looks first before they go in.
So looking at your tank, like it doesn't look like there's a huge amount of flow. And that's something I think if you're keeping probably quite delicate invertebrates and you want to see even something like a royal grandma, I find when you've got quite a lot of flow, they hide a lot more. Whereas when you turn off flow, a lot of these more cryptic fish come out. So I just wondered what's your approach to flow? It does look a bit lower from here, but it's hard to tell on camera.
It definitely is low. You've well spotted. It was partly intentional for exactly what you just said. I wanted a lot of these sort of timid fish to make sure that they were comfortable, and inverts, to make sure that they were comfortable coming out. And I think that's why things like the Donald ducks are very active because it's not a turbid environment. I have sort of found a bit of a balance in that the way I've scaped the tank or various gardens are placed, things are in flow that need to be. So you've got a Euphilia garden here with a gentle sway, but over on the far right where I've got gonies and some very sort of initial SPS going, they're in sort of a high flow path. And you do find that the fish and inverts do stay away from that zone. So it has been catered to that. I do need to up it a little bit more. I'm thinking an extra power head in this corner just to sweep across. But yes, it is, I would say, lower flow than I'm probably used to.
So if someone wanted to keep similar array of animals, then it sounds like a good tip would be to lower the flow. We have this term mixed reef in the hobby, and I think it kind of just means a bit of everything. But I feel like your tank is, at least from pictures and stuff, and just looking at it now, like the structure of it and the shape of it, the way you've scaped it and stuff, it looks much more like a natural reef. I mean, maybe you could talk a little bit about that. Like what's your approach been there?
I think when I set up the nano tank, when I first came back to the hobby, it was very much I've got to go and get everything. I want this, that. And it ended up becoming a real sort of eclectic mix. And it grew. It looked very colourful. But I did find once I'd run out of room, I looked at it and went, I don't actually quite like the result here. So when the 4-foot was set up, after having that experience in the nano of keeping as much as I could, I very quickly learned what I do like and what I don't. So I then became a bit more intentional about what was set up and why. So it's all scaped mostly I've got a mix of real live rock that's set up in the nano. So I've got a half Aussie and a half Indo, purely because I just really like the biofilm that comes with and all the various algae and pods and brittle stars and everything. And then the rest is set up with Java bones, bonsai style. So you'll see there's a lot of sort of rutting rocks that are just sort of spitting everywhere. And it was all set up with the mind that each zone could be a different coral I particularly like. So in the bottom corner, I've got a very intentional acan garden. In the middle here, you've got a Monty Digi garden because I just really like Digi. Euphilia gardens. Over on the far right, I've got Duncan's, Turbinarias, and then the Goni garden. And then across the top, I've got the SPS coming in. The very last spot I sort of got to fill is where I want acros, but I wanted the tank to mature first before going heavy into that. And then my favorite coral type, Gorgonians, they were all set up on ridges to point across because I like a tank that looks like it's deep. So I added a sort of an extra layer. So there are various gorgs sort of scattered around just to add a bit of 3D to it.
I think some of probably what makes it natural is that you've got kind of pockets of corals together, which you do see in the wild. But then you've got lots of stuff mixed in together. I noticed you've got SPS next to Gorgonians and things like that. And people tend to do kind of more proper zones, like just SPS, just LPS, or a whole tank, but it's just Acropora, for example. And I think this is to me, this typifies like what actually a mixed reef means. If you look back at the original kind of use of the term and the tanks from like the 2000s and stuff, it was proper mixed reefs, right? You've got SPS with soft coral, and I think we've moved away from that with this idea of a mixed reefs are difficult to keep, or this kind of I want to collect every Acropora type has resulted in kind of a bit more kind of uniformity, I guess. And yeah, you've got that real heterogeneity, I think, which makes it seem like a real reef mixed in with that unusual selection of inverts and fish. I think really sells that kind of wild effect.
I think the other thing I put in there as well that more out of my own interest, as I've actually got about 6 species of macroalgae mixed in amongst all the rock as well. So you can't really see it on the blue lights here, but there's a big giant colony of red gracilaria in the background there. I've got cactus algae in the sandbed, and then there's a few others that are just spot rhodopeltis on the far right. There's a few, but exactly for that, it's more when you're in the wild, you don't just see sort of algae in 1 or 2 spots. It's kind of mixed in with, where there's a gap, there's usually algae. So I tried to replicate that, and with zoas as well. There are pockets of zoas where there's probably not enough room for a whole other colony, but I can fill that gap with something.
I think Gareth's doing that, aren't you? You're filling in the gaps with zoas.
I'm calling it my war zones because I'm pretty LPS dominated, and when they get stingy at night, there's just clear gaps. So I'm putting soft corals in there because they can handle that a bit more, can't they? So yeah. So in terms of your tank, then you've told us your kind of some of the things you're going for in terms of fish and inverts. What coral wise are you looking for, if anything?
I would say I'm quite obsessive with the hobby in that regard, in that I spend so much time reading about various things or trawling old threads, just because I do find it really cool to see what's been out there, or what's possible to get that I haven't seen before. So I go for corals that either I haven't seen in person or just something I find very exotic. A number of people online will have known about my hunt for Ventolina. So Gorgonia Ventolina has been my holy grail for years, which is the typical sea fan you see.
Yeah, so it's kind of, it looks like a proper fan, in fact it's very thin, completely kind of vertical kind of structure. Yeah, it's really, really cool.
As of about 3-4 months ago, I finally got a frag of it, and it's really, really tiny, but it's in my tank, so I'm very happy. But I am still looking for sort of that big colony, so I'm hoping at some point next month to be able to go to Dijon myself. We're planning a trip through rugby to go and collect a bunch of stock, and they are one of the only places in the world that can seem to, or in Europe rather, that can get it. So I'm really hoping that'll come in. So that's a true holy grail of mine. And then other things in there that I've tried to collect, I've got a colony of Turbinaria heronensis.
Yeah, nice.
I've got next to the Duncans, because you can almost see the evolution of one to the other. So I find that quite cool. I have a massive colony of branching Cyphastria that came from Steve Spicer's tank. Never seen it. I mean, you quite often see the frags when they're in shops, but this is sort of bigger than my fist, and I just found that sort of enchanting. It's like, wow, I've never seen one that big. Other than that, acans and gorgs are my favourite, so you'll see various sort of colours and varieties in there. And then NPS, I have a sort of attachment to NPS, so I'm after currently a Manila gorg, and I do have some fathead dendros as well, which came in by accident and was like, oh my god, that is extremely rare. So I was like, so I've got to have those.
They come from Australia, right? And they're not imported anymore? Or?
There are two. There are Indo and Australia. The Indo are illegal. The Australia are.
Ah, okay.
And this is where I say I'm a bit obsessive. So I think most suppliers in the UK, even CITES and APHA, probably know me by name now because I've pestered them religiously about things. So the Ventolina, for example, I was going to drive to White Corals in Germany and bring them back myself, and I've got all of the things in place you need to be able to do that. I think that is the key to getting things you want. It's as in just be
the paperwork,
paperwork, yeah, red tape. But they're asking the question because it's always a no until you know. So if there's something you're after and you haven't seen it, do ask shops or do ask why. Why don't I see these things? Is it possible to get them in? And usually it is. It's just they're not. People aren't really after varieties of gorgs, I would say, compared to acras or torches. So it's probably a shop's not going to get that in unless somebody asks for it. So
I love gorgonias, all the ones I've got, and I get so many questions like, where did you get this? Where did you find that? And it's like, I just found it in a random Maidenhead Aquatics in Newbury, for example. It's like, I couldn't have planned it. It was just a case of going around, and I wasn't looking for it. But when I saw it, I knew it was something that was rare in it. I'm in two minds. I think it's a good thing that they don't import stuff that isn't going to sell. And that is likely to die or just kind of sit there or be neglected or whatever. But I would like to see a bit more variety because maybe that's something I need to do more of is I've mentioned this before, but I like the thrill of going into a shop and not knowing where there is, whereas Gareth orders what he's after. And so I've never really gone down that route of like, okay, I really want this specific thing, I'm going to order it. There is something at the moment I really want. I think Bodes who have captive bred what they called, my brain today is terrible. They are a type of sand sifting gobby.
The two spot?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they started captive breeding those in Palau, I think. And I messaged TMC and they were like, we can get them, but you need to order them through your shop. And problem is, like, yeah, I've said Moss End's the one I go to the most, but it's still over an hour for me to get to. So I think they probably do recognize me because I go there quite often, but I don't have that kind of rapport or relationship with them. So maybe we need to get Ed on the podcast or one of the team from there and build that relationship. But because there's a few things like that I really want. I know that they're out there, like captive bred mandarins, for example. I've not seen those in a long time, but they must be coming in. I mean, you said you've seen them yourself, right? So
yeah. I think the last pair I saw was about 2 months ago. Rugby had, but I'm sure Rory or Ed happy to sort of chat about things like that. And obviously, I'm biased to those two shops, but I would say this is true for all shops. If these things do come in, TMC have access to all these things around the world. It's just demand. If somebody hasn't asked the question, a shop may not either know it's available or just won't get them in because they don't expect people to buy them. And I think with the hobby where it is at the moment, I think it's probably important that they're able
that they're careful. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so we've heard a lot from Jake, James, and Gareth. Have you got any weird stuff in your tanks? James, you've got quite a lot of unusual things, I think.
Define weird, I think.
I mean, actually, I was going to start on that, but I changed my mind. I mean, what do we mean by weird? I mean, I think it is just stuff that you probably don't see that regularly in most tanks, right? So
they're definitely weird.
Yeah.
James has got some pretty funky bits and bobs in there, haven't you?
Yeah, I don't know quite though what it is. I mean, I've got some like different sponges in there and some like different macroalgae. I've got some, like candy cucumbers. Yeah, a feather duster's weird, I don't know, like those sort of, they look weird to me.
Yeah.
But, like, are people keeping them or not? Like, I think I've got some like mushrooms that to me just like look otherworldly, but like, are they weird? I don't know if they are or if they're not. Weird is like what's not sold on WhatsApp groups and through raffles. Then my whole tank's pretty weird because it's mostly soft coral.
Brown stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know. I was thinking about this when the subject came out, Chris, and I was like, I'm not sure what's weird and what's not weird.
Maybe a candy cucumber, that's weird.
I mean, they look weird, don't they?
Yeah.
In terms of like what they do.
You've had that over a year, I think. So we were with you when you bought it.
Longer, yeah, maybe 2 years. It was in the 4-foot tank when it was fully up and running in its pump, and this has been set up for 11 or 12 months now. It's a funny old thing. It sort of sticks to the rockwork. It's sort of glued itself there. I don't know if it's got some form of sucker or I don't know how it attaches, but mine loves sticking its head or its bum. I'm not sure what it is.
I think it's both, actually.
Okay. Well, then that is definitely weird.
Yeah.
It is that. But yeah, so it sort of sticks its end out into the water column, into like a stream of flow. It must be carrying food, detritus, and all of those sorts of things. And then, puts out its fronds and starts feeding. And I love, Jake was touching on that, like those sort of interactions between things. And I suppose like the candy cucumber feeding, putting its fronds out, and then one by one, in almost like a clockwise direction, it pulls the frond into its mouth or bum hole, whichever one it is, and sort of cleans it. So yeah, that is weird. Like that's a weird animal, but like there's a lot of things under the sea that are odd.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's why I wanted to do this episode, because I think that as we've heard from Jake, there's a lot out there which you can keep. Which one of it is probably just not awareness. So something you mentioned, Jake, like you read and research a lot. I mean, what are you reading? Like, where are you finding out about these creatures?
Truthfully, it's just the most random Google things that I start off. So either I'm reading a book that is just a well-known reefing book, and I see a picture of something, and I go, "Oh, what's that?" Just go off a trail, or it's something that I've just started, and I've gone weird inverts to keep, and it's literally just as broad as that, and I'll just come across reef to reef. Some very old ones on reefs.com, Reef Central, these old forums.
I love going on Reef Central and looking at the old build threads. Yeah,
exactly. And you see all these, because obviously live rock back then was, the pinnacle of everybody, everybody had that. So they used to get in all these weird things and you go, oh, well, what's that? So then you start to sort of learning about, are they still able to come in? And the other thing, the other one, weirdly, is like documentaries. So just literally learning about types of things that are out there, and then going off on trails and things. So I'm often, the one thing I like to do is have a look on, the US website or import lists that I can sort of have a look at, because there are things on there you've never heard of, especially the US sites that they'll have. I think there's Seahorse Savvy is one of my
Yeah,
favorites.
yeah.
You've come across that one. I just love that website because there's so. I mean, that's where I learned about. There's a type of orange brittle star that is hosted by gorgonians, and it will live on the branches. And then one day in a shop, I saw orange starfish living on a gorgonian, and exactly what they were, just from reading something on a website. So random searches, I think, is the honest truth.
Gareth, do you have any weird stuff? You're a bit safer, I think.
Yeah,
I also think you've got a lot of fish that would probably eat anything weird.
Yeah, so I guess like in terms of inverts, I've got an abalone. That's not that weird, but it's unusual, isn't it? You don't see loads of them. I was thinking about it. I think probably my coral. I know I've probably not mentioned this before, but I keep pectinia. I never talk about it, but that's probably like my like James is saying in terms of it's not necessarily weird, but it's not what people are keeping. But I really like the form, the structure, the colours. They really work for me. But yeah, what it did make me think was maybe you could pitch it to me, Jake. Like I'll go into a shop, I see these creatures, I'm like, oh, what if I eat my coral? Like pitch it to me, make the most reef safe reefer. Think about stocking some of your interest in inverts.
I think it really does depend on what your enjoyment level is, though, because some people just won't find it interesting to watch inverts live. So I guess if you're open to seeing what happens out in the big wide oceans that you won't ever come across on your telly, definitely have some weird inverts just so you can see that behavior yourself.
So I guess for me, I love the interaction. I'm very much a naturey person, so it's the fear. Like, what if it goes and eats something? What if someone else eats it? Like, and that's why you were saying, like, in terms of like the rules and things, there's quite a lot out there that says don't do it, but experience says that quite a lot of the things you can do. But I'm really nervous about inverts for some reason. I don't know why.
Your hawkfish would nail a lot of them.
There is that risk, isn't there?
I would say that there are some sort of staple rules that are, for hawkfish, obviously a no-no. I wouldn't be putting any in. I very, very briefly was tempted to put in a trio of geometrics in. But again, because there was a trio of them available, and I was like, well, that's unusual to see a trio like that. But it was just that for me was a level where I was like, that is a risk with some of the smaller shrimp I have. But I guess in a way, isn't it also cool to be the one that gets to learn that firsthand? So, like, for example, you say, what if it goes in? But, you'll find out. And then you'll know, you can tell other people. And I guess that's what sort of pioneers in the hobby did. Most things were not kept. Cleaner shrimp probably weren't known until they were put in.
That relationship with your retailer is so important. It goes beyond, doesn't it, a normal relationship that a reefer would have with their retailer. Even Gareth, your relationship with your LFS, they can't have that relationship with everybody. There just isn't enough time in the day. They'd have to start hiring people to be able to offer that sort of bespoke service. But I think through that bespoke service, you get a degree of transparency around where these inverts, where the fish, where the corals are coming from that you otherwise wouldn't get as a retail customer. And I think that needs to be put back upon the retailer in that if the retailer wants to inspire more diversity and rarity within fish tanks, then they have to order to what sells, but they also have to take some responsibility over what sells, and they have to sell the things that they think are interesting. And the way that they are able to do that, in my opinion, is through having more transparent, shorter supply chains and being able to communicate those and having a close working relationship with that distributor. And Jake, you touched on it, in terms of it coming through TMC or what have you, seeing it on a list. Well, actually, that can be scaled and made available to more people. And then in turn, that will create more diversity within the hobby. But it needs retailers with the energy to do that. I think that there's a dearth and a lack of retailers with the energy to do that. And that is why we're seeing this growth of e-com online businesses that are popping up, because let's face it, it's a hell of a lot more convenient for the customer. So you've got this sort of cycle, this sort of hobbyist retailer cycle, where you've got retailers about the energy that are just bringing in things that buy, then the retailers get less and less busy because people go to e-com businesses that can supply that in a more convenient way. And that's my sort of call to arms to retailers. It's like, get in control of your supply chain, make sure it's transparent, communicate about it, bring things that are interesting into the shop and sell them to the people that you think are going to have success with them. And by doing that, hopefully we can create a more diverse, more interesting hobby. And I'm going to get off my soapbox, and
that's a good point, because like you said, James, I'm lucky that I've got my relationship with the local fish store, and actually having chatted with him, that was kind of his point. Was like he orders in his stuff he knows is safe, he can sell. Like at the end of the day, he's got to sell a certain amount of fish. They can't hang around there. But what he did find is when he was ordering stuff in for me, he'd then get a load more orders for those things, because he's like, I've not ordered those in for ages. Go on, let's get some in. And he's like, oh, I've had to order another load in because someone saw them and they thought they were cool. So I think for him, it almost works like it's a bonus in that it's a good bit of advertising, it's something different. And so there's definitely a pro to the shop, isn't there, for doing that kind of thing?
I think if one person wants it, probably more people want it than you might realize. So we were talking about this a bit earlier, but even in the same shop, you'd often go and look at the freshwater section, and they'll have a proper label with like the Latin name, where it comes from, a little blurb about how to keep it. And I don't know what it's like at Rugby, but I think at least at Moss End and most shops I go to, they either just have the TMC sticker or the name and the price. If you've never seen it before, you have to almost like research in the shop, like, where does this come from? Could I actually keep it? And like you were saying, James, if they had a little, I mean, again, it goes back to like how much time and effort do they have? Like, I'm not saying, I think I appreciate that they're really limited, but it would be really nice to have a little, if you had a Gorgonian, for example, brown Gorgonian, like if you had a sign that kind of explained where it came from, a bit of, I don't know, life history and why it's interesting, it might encourage people to think, oh yeah, actually this is cool. It's not just a brown coral. It's something that comes from the Caribbean and it has this weird symbiosis with, I don't know, a shrimp or something. I don't know, maybe that would help sell some of these stranger things rather than just, these hype names.
Why don't they own the research whilst you're in shop to make it more experiential? Why don't they put QR codes on their product limbs where you scan the QR code and it goes through to a shop branded page that tells you where it comes from, where it's been supplied, pairing.
Most of the time when you Google it, you end up on the Maidenhead page and it has a care sheet for that fish, even for kind of rare marine stuff. Many times it has it there. So that's a really good suggestion. You could scan it and it would even take you to their website on how to keep it and stuff. Yeah.
The reality is that we live in an omni-channel world now. So people shop across internet, in store, from in each other, even, on WhatsApp groups from other hobbyists. So you've got to really try and I think the retailers, to be successful, have to really try and control and own their information space. And you've got somebody in store there. It's like, how many reef shops do you go into where there's no internet connectivity, so you can't even research it? Like, why not just provide a free Wi-Fi and a QR code and really own that space and own that research and use it as an opportunity to upsell?
Yeah.
Because there's a commercial benefit there. I mean, I'm not talking about like, oh, if you buy this fish, you've got to feed this type of food or what have you. But, in a sort of insensitive, non-scientific way. But if you buy this mandarin, then you're probably going to have to feed some live copepods. So here are where the live copepods are. Buy them near the till. There's opportunity there to be able to do the job of somebody as well through technology, and it's not expensive. The technology and the information is probably there for a lot of these shops.
No, I really actually quite like the QR idea. I'm going to bring that up because I think that's a really good idea. I think the only retort I would have, trop versus, I mean, as you say, the tropicals are usually pretty labelled. They have clear labels, care requirements. I would say the one thing with marines being a bit unique is you quite often have individuals rather than shoals.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
And that's so fluid. 1 week to the next, there'll be so many, at least, from what I've seen, tanks will be different. Coral tables, you'll have frags upon frags of various different coral, and it'll be quite hard to label every single one. But I do think there's possibly room to say, just even almost like a fact book somewhere, just to say, well, these are the fish that generally can come in, or general care sheets. So I really like that idea. It's a good idea.
Or these family of fish or whatever it might be. This is in the family of mandarins. These are the foods you're going to likely need to feed. This is the maturity of your tank.
Yeah, and I mean, once they've made that label as well, they could just reuse it, right? They could print 5 of it or whatever. I mean, like when I ever go to Moss, they've always got clownfish, they've always got mandarins, they've always got chromis, So you probably have a you might get the occasional rare one that doesn't have a label or something, but yeah, I think QR code is really good. I think Moss End said they're going to, or they have put in Wi-Fi because for that problem that basically you can't get Wi-Fi inside. It's always the same at Lechlade as well, Gareth. I'm always having to just go outside for a second. I'll come back. I want to Google this weird shrimp. Yeah,
but you'd sell more, wouldn't you? As well, if you could access that information, because you'd make decisions whether they're positive or not. Whereas, particularly selling the unusual stuff, and I think Gareth, you touched on this, or the rarer stuff. Give me the elevator pitch. Sell it to me. Well, you shouldn't be asking Jake for that.
No.
You should be getting that when you're in the shop and you're stood in front of it. And if they can't give you that, then they probably shouldn't be selling it in the first place. I think there needs to be some work done there. I know it's not easy, but I'm sure that we can enrich that whole experience. And I think ultimately it's going to be key to bricks and mortar shops surviving, because if it is just on what's selling, what's convenient, what can we do the cheapest, then the e-commerce retailers are going to absolutely wipe the floor with them, because it's so much more convenient to buy online and get it delivered.
I also wonder whether once you've been in the hobby 5-6 years or something, you start to get a bit bored, right, of seeing that, the same stuff that they bring in to sell. Most shops I go to, I'm like, yeah, it's like a sort of standard, nice selection of things. But what I'm looking for is the weird stuff. And I can't be the only one. I mean, I think just the 4 of us here are always looking for kind of the more unusual things or something a bit different, or ordering in special things. So I'm sure there are other people out there as well. And so that's probably a good, it's a hook to keep people in the hobby. If you're seeing those kind of weird things coming in, for people who have been in the hobby a while, they're always looking for something new. They're always wanting to learn something new. So having those kind of unusual things in and doing that responsibly in a way that someone can immediately in the shop find out about it and stuff, I think would really help grow the hobby, or at least keep people interested and coming back to it.
I've got nothing against collecting. I think people will ultimately, find something as they get into the hobby that they're interested in, whether it's like aquaria, torches, hammers, LP, whatever it may be. And I'm like, go for it and go and collect that. And, my thing at this particular moment in time isn't any more sort of superior to whatever you're into, whether it's more rare, more difficult to find or not. And I think that, probably that difficulty to find that rarity is what we've been talking about is linked with how long you've been into the hobby, because, we are all collectors at heart. Jake just reeled off his massive list of inverts. Tell me that man does not collect inverts, and I'll show you a liar. And I'm the same. I'm collecting lots of different things, and so are you, Chris, I'm sure, and so are you, Gareth, I'm sure. And that's absolutely fine. And I think that as you've been doing it longer, you want to sort of make it more difficult, right? Because it's like playing a computer game. You up the difficulty level. You start on beginner. And I'm not saying that torches are beginner corals in a sort of keeping sense or what have you, but they're easier to find. You can go to your local fish shop; they're available widely. And I think as you get more into it, as you get a bit more bored, Chris, to use your terminology, I think you want to up the difficulty level, and you get attracted to the slight of rarer things, and that can go in sort of 2 ways, can't it? It can go down the route of sort of expense, really expensive fish, that aren't available, whether it's tangs or types of expensive grammars or candy basslets or what have you. Or you can be finding like the brownest, hairiest gorgonian you could possibly think of. But really, that's just the favorite flavor of whoever's collecting it. There's no right or wrong there. I think that what is right or wrong is if we end up with a hobby that is completely ubiquitous in terms of what is available to the hobbyist, and that's what's going to stop the hobby, or it's going to hold it back, or stop it from being able to progress. So it's like, how do you free? And it is a hobby that revolves around the import, supply chain, and retail of stock. So it's like, how do you make that market more diverse, more successful, more interesting, and keep people coming back and giving people what they what they want. And I think by and large, the hobby's really successful in it in some ways. Like, it's great to see these booms, these like real focuses, like torches have had their moment in the sun. I've seen gonnies have their moment in the sun, and there is always a trend, and that's good. But it has to be just more than that. It has to be more than the sort of annual trend, hasn't it? I think we want to inspire more diversity, more choice, and ultimately more transparency, more depth. I think, not in terms of deep water corals, but more depth in terms of the decisions that we make around what we keep. Because I truly believe that's how you grow this thing.
And I do find your point there about the fact that everybody has their one thing. I think that is what makes the hobby really interesting, because every single person you meet has a different stock list and interest to them. And that's what I particularly, that's kind of why I like working at a shop every so often. I just find it really cool to meet, like-minded people, but they've either gone down a whole different rabbit hole to you in the hobby, or, you may not keep the same things. Like, people who keep massive tangs and wrasses. I haven't kept those yet because I haven't had the space, but I find it really cool to see how passionate people are about the various things that they love to keep. So I do find that's why I really love this hobby, is just the vast variety of things that are in people's homes, in their slices of the ocean.
Being in the retail side of things, what's the most unusual kind of like tank setup or like idea you're like, wow, that's cool, that you've come across when you've been in the shop?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've met somebody it's a water focused tank, so it's cooler water, and they've got things like pinecone fish in there and flashlight fish. So obviously the flashlight fish are famous for they have a bacterial, I don't quite fully know, but they have bacteria under their sort of cheek, which is fluorescent, like glows vibrant green. And that is really unusual. I've only ever seen them once before. I didn't even know you could keep those. And to find somebody who's keeping that's really cool, to the point where learning about them having to go through, like, for example, this is where you go off into different tangents of things I would never have known. You can't copper flashlight fish because the copper would kill the bacteria that would be fluorescent. So you kind of defeat the whole purpose of keeping them. So then they tell you about all their whole quarantine process they had to do specifically to avoid that. And it's like, wow, that's a whole topic of conversation I just had that I would never have come across. And then obviously all the various deep, they have a Dr. Seuss fish in there.
Wow.
So livestock, so various things in there that, again, I probably would never keep because I can't in this tank, but just that's a hell of a unique tank. So yeah, that's a very cool one. And then usually it's the people who come in with a particular passion. Like, for example, we've seen mine's inverts and gorgs. So that's my favorite thing to talk about. But you'll have people come in who are very, very focused on like a particular type, and they have, pipe organs. There are so many different types. We've got, there are so many things that you can keep that are just very different, and everybody seems to have their one. So I find it very cool to see that. But I would say, that deep water one was the most unique. Seeing that with all the sort of MPS gorgonians and corals as well, that was a real sort of treat.
Have you seen that tank?
Yeah, it's a 5 foot tank. It's lit by one single Kessel.
Okay.
So very shimmery.
That's cool.
Yeah, for it though, so it's very, very, it's almost like reef edge sort of focus. Very vertical, lots of pockets, so there's a lot of activity in and out of the rocks. Very, very cool fish. And pine cones, just really cool to see in a group.
So do they run a chiller? Because I've often thought about keeping sort of cooler water species, and then I'm like, oh, that's a headache.
So yeah, they do run a chiller, and obviously with the summers we seem to be having nowadays, that was quite critical. But yes, they run a chiller. I think just while I'm thinking about the other really cool one that is becoming more common as well are the macroalgae sort of lagoon types with pipefish and seahorses, and I think they have the sort of potential to be absolutely stunning tanks. So seeing one of those really well done is just always lovely to see.
All right. Well, thanks, Jake, so much for joining us. It's been really interesting hearing about all the different fish, invertebrates and coral that you keep. And hopefully you've given people some ideas about different things they might be able to look out for or keep to spice up their aquariums. Jake, if you want to learn more about your aquariums, how can they find you online?
I'm a bit reclusive when it comes to social media. So it doesn't have an Instagram presence or anything, but I've got a thread on Ultimate Reef. I think it's big tank, small fish. And then obviously if anybody can just message me, or obviously rugby, if I'm there once sporadically, just pop in, give me a chat, no problem.
Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for listening again, and thanks Jake for joining us in this episode, and we'll see you all on the next one.
You've been listening to Reefing Radio. Subscribe, share, and stay salty. Reefing Radio, over and out.